Today we are looking at Spanish colonial settlement of Texas. And at the top of your page, it should say Lesson 4, Religious Establishments. And at the bottom, it should say Page 1 of 5. We're looking at the 5 E's over Texas material. The first one is on Fray Massanet. Do you see his name at the top of your page? Okay. And I'm going to read, and what I'm going to ask you to do is follow along with your eyeballs so you can remember where to find things when you're answering questions. Fray Massanet was the founder of the first Spanish mission in East Texas. It's called San Francisco de los Tejas in the 1690s. The exact dates of his birth and death are not known. Massanet came to the Americas in 1683 and was involved in several expeditions, including the search for Fort St. Louis, which you'll remember was founded by La Salle, but then failed after a Caronquia attack. After much difficulty with the Indians and conflict with the Spanish authorities, Massanet and other missionaries burned down their mission, that being the San Francisco de los Tejas mission. And they went to Mexico. However, 20 years later, the mission was reoccupied. Below is an excerpt from a letter Massanet sent to the viceroy or ruler of New Spain regarding one of Massanet's expeditions. By the way, that word viceroy is one of your vocabulary words, and we want you to remember what that means. Here's what the letter says. We left Coahuila, Monclova, for the Tejas on the third day of the Easter fest. By the way, the Tejas is what he's calling some of those Indians. On the third day of the Easter fest, March 28, 1690. We went on traveling by the route described in the journal, which was kept of this expedition. What I noticed was that on our first trip, we had found many Indians along the rivers and everywhere else. While this time we went to inspect the bay of Espiritu Santo and returned to the Guadalupe River without having found a single Indian in all the country. And after we had arrived, some of the soldiers of Reino de Leon said that they wished to bathe in order to be able to tell what they had to say that they had bathed in the sea. This being esteemed so remarkable a thing that they carried away flasks of seawater, which later, in their own country of Monterey, it was held a great favor to try and to taste because it was seawater. There came also to that spot an Indian who was thoroughly acquainted with the road into the country of the Tejas, and he showed us the way until we met with the governor of the Tejas on May 18th, together with 14 or 15 of his Indians and the Indian whom we had sent to him with our message. 3 days later, on Monday, May 22nd, 1690, we entered the village situated northwest of the present town of Hueches in Houston County. It was raining heavily on our arrival. That year it had, up to that time, rained but little, and already the corn was suffering from the drought. But every day of the 11 that we spent in the village, it rained very hard. We came to the governor's house, where we found a number of Indian men and women and children. Kneeling, we concluded the litany, the religious ceremony, and we blessed the house. Soon the governor and the other Indians came up to kiss my robe, and the former bade us enter in order to look at his house. The house is built of stakes thatched over with grass. It is about 20 varas high, is round, and has no windows. Daylight entering through the door only. This door is like a room door, such as we have here. In the middle of the house is the fire, which is never extinguished by day or by night. And over the door, on the inner side, there is a little superstructure of rafters very prettily arranged. Ranged round one half of the house inside are 10 beds, which consist of a rug made of reeds laid on 4 forked sticks. Over the rug they spread buffalo skins on which they slept. At the head and foot of the bed is attached another carpet, forming a sort of arch, which, lined with a very brilliantly colored piece of reed matting, makes what bears some resemblance to a very pretty alcove. On the other half of the house, where there are no beds, There are some shelves about 2 varas high, and on them are arranged large round baskets made of reeds in which they keep their corn, nuts, acorns, beans, etc. A row of very large earthen pots, like our water jars, and 6 wooden mortars for pounding the corn in rainy weather. For when it is fair, they grind it in the courtyard. Hey, turn to the second page with me now. The next morning, May 26th, I went out with Captain Alonso de Leon a little way and found a delightful spot close to the brook, fine woods with plum trees like those in Spain. And soon afterwards, on the same day, they began to fell trees and cart the wood. And within 3 days, we had a roomy dwelling and a church wherein to say Mass with all propriety. We set in front of the church a very high cross of carved wood. When the church and the dwelling intended for the priests had been finished on May 31st, they carried into these buildings all that was to be left for the priests. And on the morning of the 1st of June, the octave of the feast of Corpus Christi, we consecrated the church and celebrated Mass, after which the Te Deum Laudamus was sung in thanksgiving, the soldiers firing a royal salute. The church and the village were dedicated to our Holy Father, St. Francis. If the Tejas asked for priests, remember the Tejas are the names, that's what he's calling the Indians, the Tejas. If the Tejas asked for priests and desired baptism, the priests were to remain there. And if the Tejas proved quite friendly and no danger was to be expected at their hands, no large garrison was to be left behind. In other words, they're not going to leave soldiers behind if that's the case. If, on the other hand, they proved troublesome, as many soldiers should remain as seemed needful. Last paragraph. However, in the end, it was arranged that the 3 soldiers recommended by me should remain there. They were willing to do so and were quite content. On the 2nd of June, we took our departure, and the priests walked with us a little way out of the village. Then we took leave of one another with many tears of joy and gladness, for these men did not sorrow at being left. All right, now let's look at some questions that you'll want to answer as you're going through this again and looking at it again. 1. Why was Massanet important to the history of Texas? You'll have to think about that a little. I don't think that's an easy question with Massanet. With some of these others we study, it is, but not so much Massanet. During what time period did Massanet live? So on that, just go look for those dates and write down the range of dates that you can figure out. Remember, they don't know when he was born exactly, but you can come up with an estimation. What important events and issues did he, Massanet, experience? And you'll just get some of that from what we've read here. All right. Do your best.